Background. People often draw trait inferences from the facial appearances of other people. Face structure is used to form not only global impressions, but specific trait impressions. Person attributes that are important for specific decisions are deduced from facial appearance and influence these decisions. General hypothesis. Because judgment is made after 100 millisecond exposure correlated with high judgments made in the absence of time constraint, increased exposure time leads to more differentiated person impressions. Willis and Todorov investigated the minimal conditions under which persons or people make such conclusions. Their goal was to find support for their specific hypothesis that 100 millisecond exposure to a face is sufficient for making a trait judgment. That additional exposure time increased confidence in trait judgments without necessarily changing the judgments. And that additional exposure time allows for more differentiated trait impressions. "245 undergraduate students from Princeton University participated in the studies. 128 participated in a preliminary study to obtain measures of trait inferences from facial appearances in the absence of time constraint. 117 participated in the 5 experiments. In all the studies, researchers used a database of photographs of 70 amateur actors. 35 females and 35 males. Participants were divided into 5 different groups and asked to judge the picture based on attractiveness, liking, trustworthiness, aggressiveness, and competence. In all the experiments, faces unfamiliar to the participants were presented for 100 milliseconds, 500 milliseconds, or 1,000 milliseconds for each face. Participants were asked to make a trait judgment and then to express their confidence in. As shown in Table 1, even after 100 milliseconds exposure to a face, trait judgments were highly correlated with judgments made in the absence of time constraint. Researchers expected that they would find a highest correlation for judgment of attractiveness because, after all, it's a property of facial appearance. However, the correlation for judgment of trustworthiness were slightly higher. All judgments show the same pattern as a function of exposure time. But when that exposure time increased to 500 milliseconds, Table 1 shows the correlation between time constraints, trait judgments from facial appearance, and judgment made in the absence of time constraints. So the 100 milliseconds and the 500 milliseconds and the 1,000 milliseconds. The stimulus duration shows the percentage of variance in judgment made in the absence of time constraint accounted for by time constraint trait judgments. The probability of trait attribution, which is the top panel, the response time is the middle panel, and confidence in trait judgment, bottom panel, as a function of the trait being judged in exposure time. The probability of trait attributions of aggressiveness is reversed, i.e., higher probability means fewer attribution of aggressiveness, so that for all traits, higher probabilities reflect more positive balance. Confidence judgments were made on a 7-point scale. Error bars show within subject standards errors. Table 2 shows the factor loadings of trait judgment on factors identified in the principal component analysis with Bermax rotation. For each exposure time, factors analysis were performed on the aggregated judgment for each phase. Limitations. The researchers used photos and all the information provided, whether they wore gray t-shirts and no facial hair, but it did not say anything about the races or the context of the actors in the pictures that they were used. The participants were readily available. They used college students, and they were a bigger pool. Should it have been used outside of the student population because it might have been more accurate in order to review first impressions. Researchers discovered that the minimum time sufficient for people to make a specific trait inference from facial appearance was 1/10 of a second. Their findings suggested that trait inferences from facial appearances can be characterized as fast, intuitive, System 1 processes. Person impressions are created effortlessly online from minimal information.